Good afternoon for all the committee and all the participants of International Conference on Language, Literature, Culture, and Education. Let me introduce myself. My name is Edi Nugraha. I am a graduate school student, University of Muhammadiyah, Professor Dr. Hamka. Major Indonesian Language Education. Atau Program Magister Pendidikan Bahasa Indonesia. I will be presenting my research with Professor Prima Gustianti regarding the position of Bahasa Indonesia in the language policy document of schools with an international curriculum. Public policy planning in positioning Bahasa Indonesia as Indonesia's national language has been considered successful compared to other countries. Bahasa Indonesia serves two key standings, the national language and the country's language. A country's language policy has a major role in several domains, such as families, government bodies, and schools. Historically, schools in Indonesia do not only teach the national curriculum, but instead also teach other curriculums. Some private schools also use international curriculum. An example of school that utilizes English in its teaching are SPK, Satuan Pendidikan Kerjasama, or Education Cooperative Unit School. In the history of SPK schools, they are international schools that teach international curricula. Nonetheless, the use of the word international has been removed from SPK schools' name in accordance with regulation from the Ministry of Education and Culture. Indonesian National Language Policy, which states the use of Bahasa Indonesia as the language of instruction in school, is contrary to schools with international curricula. International schools use English to deliver teaching material. Within SPK schools, guidance in language use and teaching is accommodated through a language policy document. The case study that is taken is the language policy document of Sampurna Academy. The school is thus representative of an SPK school as it teaches international curriculums, namely Cambridge and International Baccalaureate alongside the national curriculum. This research uses qualitative research with content analysis. Krippendorf explained that content analysis is a research technique used to make valid inferences and can be re-examined based on the context. The data is a language policy document and focus of research is the position of Bahasa Indonesia. To investigate the status of Bahasa Indonesia, the researchers use Polsky's theory. Spolsky explained that there are three components in language policy, namely practice, belief or ideology, and management or planning. Practice refers to the habitual pattern of language selection whose use is repeated. Belief refers to views on language and language use. And management or planning refers to attempts to modify or influence linguistic practice by the intervention of language. So this is the finding and discussion. The first element is ideology or language belief. Based on the rationale, vision and mission, and language philosophy in language policy document, we can see that schools respect diverse language and multiculturalism. School emphasize the four skills of 21st century skills, which are communication, and then the critical thinking, creative skills, and the last one is collaboration. The school realizes that language skills are extremely important in terms of skills that are needed in the 21st century. The school respects the diverse language and the culture of multicultural community in their school. Thus, a policy is needed to determine how the languages are positioned. So these are the position of the language. English is the main language and lingua franca. Bahasa Indonesia and Mandarin are additional languages. Even though English is the accepted lingua franca at Sampurna Academy and Bahasa Indonesia Mandarin are additional languages, school realized that majority of students at Sampurna Academy have English as an additional language. The school recognizes and promotes the ongoing development of students' mother tongue. So I assume that most of the Sampurna Academy students has Bahasa Indonesia as the mother tongue. We can see from the data on the number of Sampurna Academy students on the internet, most students at Sampurna Academy come from Indonesia. Furthermore, Bahasa Indonesia is the first language option beside American English language based on the data from the school assessment site Skyward. In relation to these multiple languages, the school then develops the language skills of its students by focusing on maintaining the mother tongue of its student, which for most of its students is Bahasa Indonesia. They argue that mother tongue must be developed alongside additional language as this promotes respect for an individual's cultural identity, language, national values, and allows a respect for cultures different for a culture different from their own. Then next to ecology or language practice. In the primary and kindergarten, Bahasa Indonesia are taught from kindergarten to grade 6. Class placement based on the mother tongue. Allowing students to use mother tongue in class is the concept of language acquisition. So how about secondary? In secondary, school allocates 3 periods per week, grade 7 and 8, 2 periods per week for grade 9 and 10, and 2 until 6 periods per week for grade 11 and 12. So it's mentioned in the part of language pathways practice at Sampurna Academy in language policy document. So this is the last part of language policy based on Polski's theory. It's planning or language management. So we can see from several situations for both English and Bahasa Indonesia. The first situation in class interaction, all subjects use English beside Bahasa Indonesia class, and certain situation they can use Bahasa Indonesia, such as earthquakes, science lab, and physical education. And explaining complex concepts can be done in Bahasa Indonesia. In the situation of disaster simulation, first in English and followed by Bahasa Indonesia. During the break time, teacher on duty must communicate in English. Student can use any language. Student can use the language of their origin as long as it doesn't exclude other students from language that their group is using. For correspondence and communication with parents is bilingual, English and Bahasa Indonesia. Communication between colleagues with the scope of large group, English must be used. Within the scope of small group, Bahasa Indonesia is allowed. Teaching at kindergarten, the use of both language, English and Bahasa Indonesia, and mixed code is allowed. For the provision of source books in the library, English is present, Bahasa Indonesia is present. So it comes to the last part, conclusion and recommendation. We can conclude that Sampurna Academy School still position Bahasa Indonesia as an essential language to be used and taught. This aligns with their ideology which upholds multiculturalism, multilingualism, and respect for the mother tongue. All language ideologies and philosophies presented are also applied in language management and language practice. It would be better to clearly state that individuals are allowed to use Bahasa Indonesia or other mother tongues because language acquisition and retention will continue to develop if used in everyday life. The role of teaching is to help them understand grammar and recall their acquired vocabulary. So these are the references, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you everyone. Terima kasih.